Okay, so colleagues, I want to welcome you to part 2 of our session today. And it is a very interesting session. It is a session I'm very passionate about. And I'll be sharing with you some of my insights as far as choosing an advisor or choosing a supervisor is concerned. And again, these are some of the ideas I've built over time, but also I've listened to people articulate some of them. I've listened to people discuss them. And so I'll be sharing with you what I think. Again, this is just for the beginning, and this is part of African Center for Career Mentorship. We'll be having a number of these webinars to support prospective applicants as they navigate the application journey. So I want to begin by recommending this very interesting book. This book is called How to Get a PhD. When I was putting together these slides, I was consulting this book. I have used this book for the last 3 years now, and I was given this book by my colleague from Makerere University, Dr. Lawrence Ndiejo, when I was at initial stages of conceptualizing my PhD idea. Now, since I know that a number of us on the call are at initial stages of their PhD ideation, or they are through their PhD journey, I felt this book would be very important, very valuable for you. And so you can take a photo of this book, you can access it, but I'm also happy to share with you a copy. I have a soft copy of this book. Even after this call, I'm happy to share this copy with you. So looking at choosing an advisor or choosing a supervisor, first of all, I want to tell you that a supervisor is a very important person in your career progression, in your master's journey, right from the point of application to the point of when you graduate. They are very important stakeholder in your journey. And because they are very important, we need to pay critical attention when we are choosing one. They actually matter even beyond your graduation, because wherever you'll be going, you'll be introducing yourself that I did my master's here, I did my MPhil here, I did my PhD from here, and I worked with so and so. So that supervisor is a very important person, and therefore we need to really, really care so much about them. So in this slide, I try to articulate why we should care about the choice of a supervisor or the choice of an advisor. Number one, they are critical for your academic progress or your research progress. They are very important. In other words, they can either make you or they can break you. I have interacted with a number of colleagues from some universities who got supervisors. I will use this in quotes. Some supervisors were not supportive to them, and so they were struggling. And so may I think that for your academic progress or for your research progress, a supervisor matters a lot, and so we should care about that. The second thing is that for you to get technical insights and competence, or for you to build the competence in the particular subject area, a supervisor plays a very critical role. They may not fully teach you what those areas of competence, but they can recommend you books to read. They can recommend you resources that can ground you. They can also recommend you to conferences where you can learn. They can also recommend you to research labs where you can learn from others. But also we should care about these supervisors, because with time, they will be giving us recommendation letters, either for applications, either for jobs. Those letters may be either verbal or they may be written. So we really need to care about who your supervisor is going to be. And the same thing to career growth and career opportunities, but they're also very critical in identifying funding or applying for funding or grants. They are also very important when you're going through admission process or when you're applying. But also, like I told you, in the future, when you finish your course, you'll be introducing yourself and saying, okay, my name is Abel Walekwa. And I did my PhD from here. And while I was doing my PhD, I worked with so and so and so. So it's important for you to know and to really care about who is going to supervise you for your master's and your PhD. And so I try to tease out some of the qualities that I think some of the qualities of a good supervisor. Number one, if you can do a ground job, a good job, and if you need to be intentional, which I highly recommend that you need to be intentional, please get somebody who is good at communication. I have found master's students and PhD students very depressed just because they sent their draft work to the supervisor 3 weeks ago or 4 months ago, and he has never replied or has never responded. But also I have found very many master's students and PhD students who make progress just because the supervisor gives them timely feedback. Timely, I may mean it in 3 days, in 4 days, in 1 week, or in 2 weeks. Or if the supervisor is going to be away, he alerts the student, you know what, I'm going to be away, and so maybe expect potential delay in my replies. Communication for me is a topmost quality when I'm identifying who to work with. Partly because I communicate quite a lot, and so sometimes I would like to get somebody whom we can quickly catch, rhyme with, because if I send emails and they don't reply, it keeps you in the same position sometimes, or you make a decision which they become uncomfortable or unhappy with. The other second aspect I think is very critical when you're looking for a supervisor is somebody who is interested in your research. The interest in the project you want to work on is a very critical factor. Therefore, it means that for you, you need to know the research area or the research project you want to work on. And that is why in part 1, I began from asking you what fellowships do you want to do? What courses do you want to undertake? What research do you want to do to become whom you want to become? So in other words, you are the main person. You need to first of all dictate the research area you are interested in. Once you're very clear on where you're interested in, then you can see who is that person who is doing some work in that line. The third aspect, which I think is a strong quality, is somebody being available to supervise or mentor. Now, on the list of faculties, on the list of university supervisors or lecturers, they normally, more so in the US and UK and Canada, on their staff websites, they normally put if that person is available to supervise or is not available to take on master's or PhD students. So you should look out for that. If they are not available, potentially maybe their table is full. And so you contact them when you already know they may reject you or they may be slow at giving you the guidance you need. The other aspect is the research potential. But before I come to research potential, I want to emphasize something about communication skills. As you are choosing a PhD or a master's supervisor, it's important to have a sidebar chat with the current students they are supervising. It is part of groundwork. It's part of double checking on the person you're going to work with for either 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. So it is okay for you to have a quick chat with the students in their research lab. And most of those students are available to talk to them once you contact them by email or their social media pages. And they will tell you how he communicates. They will tell you how available he is or she is. And so you'll be able to make a decision. The other aspect I wanted to bring is the research potential. And interesting, I was pointing out the aspect of having a recent research outputs. I still remember there's a time when I was looking for a PhD supervisor in 2021. And I identified somebody who was willing to be my supervisor. And so when I discussed with my mentor and we double checked, he had last published in 2018. This was 2021. So my supervisor told me, this is not an active researcher. he does not have recent outputs. So it is likely that maybe he's busy or he's not so much into academia, which for you want to go to in terms of your PhD work. So I highly recommend you to double check with their publications. But when you double check with their publications, you look at, are they the first author? Meaning that literally they led that research work. But also, are they the last author? Literally meaning they supervise that project or they supervise that research work. So their position on the authorship is extremely critical when you are choosing them. And I want you to take interest in that. The other aspect is that, do they have available funding? Do they have available projects? But are they willing to mobilize funding for your work? So I just want to give my example that when I got to University of Cambridge, the scholarship I got did not cater for research per se. But when I was choosing my supervisor, when we had first of all an informal conversation with him, he was able to clearly show that we don't have money for this, but we will look for money. We will try to mobilize money from various sources. And indeed we did that. Within the first 4 months of my PhD, we had mobilized resources for me to come and do my data collection in Uganda. So somebody having a running project is a great point to look at, but also somebody willing to work with you to identify funding for your work is another very great thing to look out for. The last aspect here is how connected they are. Do they have networks? Because when you're going to do your PhD, you really want to learn from other research labs. You want to attend conferences. You want to attend seminars. Is this person having networks? Is this person connected? Is this person having colleagues? Or is he a visiting professor in this place or a visiting lecturer in this place or the other? Does he have networks with industry or research organizations or government agencies? Because that shows their potential to mobilize resources. Now, as I get towards the end of this conversation, I just felt I should just share my insights on how we can identify a supervisor or a mentor. Number one, I highly recommend that we double check with recent publications. So what you do, if you've chosen an area you want to work on for your PhD, for example, I want to work on diabetes for my PhD. So you go to some of the research journals and then you double check the recent publications, and you can be intentional to say maybe by 2023. In other words, you want to see the very recent publications. That can help you to know who is doing some work in that line. The second thing to do is to see running research projects. Now, these supervisors or these faculties on their staff websites, after their short bio, they normally list the grants they have won or the running grants. So if you see somebody who has a running grant or a running project, chances are likely that he's willing to take on masters and PhD students. Remember, this is more to people who are planning to go for masters or MPhil or PhDs that are research-based or that are by dissertation, meaning that you will have to do research with this mentor or supervisor. The other third area where we can easily find supervisors is during the conferences. So what I mean here is that we need to be intentional. We need to be intentional in going for some of these conferences here. For example, if you want to do a PhD on malaria, and if there is a national malaria conference in Uganda, for example, you intentionally go there because we expect those who are doing research in malaria to come and publish and present their work and disseminate what they are working on. And that's how you can easily support them and contact them and they can work with you. The other aspect is consulting with the masters and PhD students whom they are supervising. Most of the US, Canada, and UK, on the students' profiles, the students always talk about whom they are working with. Or under the staff labs, they normally list the research students they are working with. So you can work, you can consult a master's or PhD student whom they are working with. If that supervisor is taking on master's or PhD students, people who are working with these people, they already know available opportunities or gaps. They will tell you, anyway, there is a grant coming. Anyway, he's not taking on people now, but he talked about this. He's open to taking on people. So that's another way you can find a supervisor for your work. The other aspect is looking at the faculty list on potential university website. So in other words, you need to identify the university you want to go to as an entry point. You say, okay, I want to go and do my PhD at Makerere University. Let me begin from there. So I get to the staff list or to the department list, and I try to double check who are the people doing some work in that line. And then you can contact them, and who knows, you can easily get there. The last aspect which I emphasize here is during exhibitions. Sometimes when you go for agricultural shows, or you can go to research shows or innovation exhibitions, the faculties or the researchers normally go to present their work there. And when they are presenting their work, it is easy for you to spot them and contact them for them to work with you. Colleagues, that is how I thought we can identify a potential supervisor. But like I told you, the biggest message for a supervisor is somebody who can communicate. So doing a ground check about that is critical, but somebody who may be interested in your research topic. So in other words, the entry point or the starting point is your research topic. So colleagues, I want to thank you so much for listening to me, and that brings me to the end of my conversation on this important topic of choosing a research advisor or a supervisor. Now, this is a very interesting line, which I want to cause a conversation with us. If you have any questions, please, you're welcome to ask, and we shall be able to share and learn together. We are few, so you can just raise your hand. I should be able to see you and give you a chance to ask. But I can begin with the question, which is the chat now, which Ruth has asked. So Ruth is saying, so at a PhD, the student chooses their supervisor. That is very true, Ruth, but also depends on the university where you are going to. But the big message is that at a PhD level, you have chance to influence who is going to be your supervisor. Actually, you have a very big chance, very, very big. And you can begin with saying, I don't want to work with so-and-so, I don't want to work with so-and-so. You can begin by saying, me, I want to work with somebody who is good in this line. And it is you to choose them. And by the way, after choosing them, you contact them. We shall have another session on how to contact supervisors and how to write what we call cold emails. So in other words, it is you take the initiative. By the way, most supervisors don't like, somebody to introduce you to them. For example, if Abel, I know you as Ruth, I write an email to my supervisor, say, dear my supervisor, I met Ruth and Ruth wants you to supervise her. Sometimes they want you to contact them yourself, and they want to hear you articulate what you want to work with them. I think that answers Ruth. And then Ruth is asking, so how then would one identify and access the supervisor? I think I have answered that when I was presenting.
Yes, did.
Yeah. Yeah, and then most of the questions here, appreciation is, you're welcome and thanks for appreciating. Please, we are few and we still have some time, so you can just raise up your hand and you ask on how to identify a potential supervisor. Why we say potential is because you can contact them and they will tell you, I'm not willing to take on people now. But we are calling them potential because they can easily accept, more so if you do groundwork, if you do background checks quite well. I want to sincerely recommend that you should pay a lot of attention to choosing them, because for a PhD, people will trust you after the PhD, depending on whom you worked with. I want to quote my mentor. It's called Danny Musinguzi. Danny Musinguzi supports in career guidance and mentorship and CV writing as well. He told me in 2021 that you can do a PhD even under a tree as long as you have a supervisor, and you'll still be marketable. Because if you have a strong supervisor in that line, they will introduce you to their networks. They will introduce you to their they will introduce to their colleagues. They will give you timely feedback. They will give you critical appraisal on your write-ups, and they will say, you know what? This is not taking you anywhere. This is what could take you somewhere. By the way, by the time you finish your PhD, people begin associating the qualities of your supervisor in you. So if your supervisor is not a good communicator, people will begin saying, anyway, he was supervised by so and so. I don't think he can do anything beyond this and the other. So pay close attention to that concept. Even taking you for scientific presentations and inviting you to give guest presentations, people will trust you. People will believe in you because they will think that you are being grounded well by that very strong supervisor in that particular field. Again, just to help the people who at ideation stage.
Doctor,
at a PhD level, you need to choose an area that you want to focus in. And so you look for supervisors in that line. The good thing, they normally give short bios and short preambles about themselves. In other words, what they have done and something like that. Okay, so David is asking, for example, in case you're doing an international master's or PhD, does your supervisor have to be international? I don't seem to understand this question well. David, can you unmute and ask?
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Are you getting me?
Yes, you're clear.
Yes, I'm inquiring in case, for example, you might have a supervisor currently within Uganda and you're interested to do a master's there abroad, but probably your research topic is finally done in Uganda, not abroad. Can you continue with the same supervisor, or you have to look for a supervisor from the other side?
Yeah, that's a very good question, David. Now, always where you want to register at for your master's and your PhD is where your first or principal supervisor will be coming from. But you can have another supervisor from Uganda. Let me give an example of my master's work. I did my master's from Barra University of Science and Technology in Uganda. And so I had two supervisors. The principal supervisor was Professor Edgar Mlogo, and he's a Ugandan, and he was based at Barra University of Science and Technology. Then I had a second supervisor called Dr. Ross Boyce from the US. And so he was very supportive, but the principal supervisor remained where I had registered for my master's. But also the other aspect I want to bring is that for international studies, like for me, I'm doing my PhD right now in the UK at University of Cambridge, but my research is in Uganda. So what happened is that I have two supervisors. I have a principal supervisor at University of Cambridge, but also I had one Ugandan supervisor. Why did we get them? Because the Institutional Review Board, which approves proposals for you to go for data collection, they require that you must have a local collaborator before they approve your work for data collection. The purpose is that a local supervisor understands what you're talking about more than somebody in the UK or in the US. So David, the answer is where you're planning to register is where the principal supervisor will come from. but you can have other supervisors from other areas as well. And you can discuss that you can discuss this with your supervisor. Okay, another question is, another person, Sam is saying, can someone help me with a scholarship form I need to fill for my master's degree in business administration? Yeah. Sam, what I can say is that we have a scholarship group, and one of the administrators of the scholarship group is on the call. He's called Emmanuel Okero. Let me see if he's still on. So Emmanuel Okero is leading in the scholarship group, where we share a lot of scholarship opportunities, and Masters of Business Administration is among the areas we normally share resources in. So I think I don't see him on the call, but please link up with me after this session. I will be happy to add you on that scholarship group, where you will be able to access a lot of scholarship information, including those for Masters of Business Administration. Yeah. So those are my contacts. Again, we still have some time, around 2 minutes. So you're welcome to ask another question in the chat, or you can just unmute, raise up your hand, and you'll ask your question about choosing a supervisor or a mentor or an advisor. It's a very critical step. Actually, when you read this book, this one here, it says that, that choosing a supervisor is the most important step for graduates, for getting a PhD. That's what this book clearly says, that is the most important step in getting a PhD. So I request you to pay a lot of attention to getting and identifying a supervisor. Okay. Daniel says, could you please, how to get a PhD? Okay, yeah. Could you please share this book? Yes, I'm going to share this book after the call. Please just feel free to link up with me on WhatsApp, and I will share it. I have a soft copy of this book. It's a very interesting book. Very, very interesting book. If you read it, you can minimize so many mistakes. So many mistakes. We can have another question. Okay, Doreen says, thank you for the presentation. Is it essential to have a supervisor at a master's program? So depends on the programs you're applying for, and depending on where you're applying. For example, in the Ugandan context, where much of the masters, you first of all study for a first year, then you do research the second year. The supervisors are allocated to you depending on the topics you're proposing to work on. But for US and UK and Canada, at master's level, at application stage, they may not even ask you, to name a supervisor. But for me, during my coaching classes where I coach people how to write winning personal statements, I highly encourage my students in the personal statements to quote the department they want to go and study in, or the faculty they want to go and work with. The purpose of that is that when they are screening the admissions, when you mention a supervisor's name, they contact them, that there is a student who is from Uganda who wants to come and join your research lab. Would you like to take them on? One thing I want to tell you that most of the masters and PhD programs in the US and the UK, they are research-based. So they are interested in people who want to do research mostly. And so a supervisor makes a lot of sense. And they can take you for an admission if somebody is available to supervise you or not. For example, if you want to do something, but they don't have a faculty who is good in that line, they may not take you on because they don't want you to get there and get stuck. Okay, so Sam says, share with me the number for Kelo. No, just contact me after this session. I'll add you as well, because I'm also one of the admins in the group. So I'll be able to add you immediately. Then Sarah says, thanks for the presentation. I'm in my last year for the master's. Can I begin on the journey for the PhD supervisor, or I need first to fully complete your master's? Actually, depending on where you're applying, but for mostly the UK and the US universities, please begin the process. Please begin the process, because what happens is that when they admit you, they give you what we call a conditional offer. And part of the requirements will be for you to finish your master's. By the way, there is also a possibility of you being considered because of your bachelor's results. In other words, you can move from the bachelor's level straight to the PhD. That is also possible. But also the other thing I want to share with you, Sarah, is that depending on whether you want to go for a PhD by research or a taught PhD, having some work experience after your master's is a plus. But also publishing your master's research or finalizing them or finishing the experiments you are working on in your master's research is very great and can market you very much for the PhD. But also when you finish your master's research, you can see the areas which are challenging you more, and therefore you can be intentional to get a supervisor who can help you to answer some of those challenging areas. Yeah. And so Doreen says, thank you, doctor, for hinting on the preferences of research-based masters. This is helpful. Okay. So colleague, thank you so much. It was nice having you. And we are 4 minutes on top of the hour. I just want to tell you that we shall have another session next Tuesday, the same time. We shall share the link and we shall share the information as well. We are going to have this recording on our YouTube handle. The YouTube handle is African Center for Career Mentorship. So feel free to go there and you'll see a lot of resources in there. So thank you so much for today and see you next Tuesday, the same time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dr.